November 3rd, 2025, Johnny Bomer Proving Grounds in Florida. A modified Lamborghini Urus sits at the start of a 2.3-mile straight runway. This isn't a regular Urus. Engineers have pushed it to make 1,012 horsepower, about as much power as 7 Honda Civics combined. The driver floors it. The SUV rockets forward. At 197 miles per hour, something goes wrong. The temperature gauge spikes. The engine is getting hotter, 7 degrees hotter every single second. At 201 miles per hour, the paint on the hood starts bubbling from the heat underneath. A thermal camera shows the temperature at 412 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt aluminum. Then the computer throws an error message the engineers have never seen before: cooling system saturation. Translation: the SUV had run out of atmosphere. The air around it couldn't absorb heat fast enough. The vehicle was creating heat faster than physics would allow it to cool down. The engine computer did the only thing it could. It cut the power and shut down the run. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This was physics sending a bill that engineering couldn't pay. Welcome to the era where 1,000 horsepower is normal and where we finally hit limits that money can't solve. In 2026, you can walk into a dealership and buy an SUV with 1,000 horsepower. The Lotus Eletre makes 905. The Aston Martin DBX makes 697. Companies like BYD in China are making electric SUVs with over 1,200 horsepower. But here's what the brochures don't tell you. Most of these vehicles can only use that full power for about 10 seconds. Then the computers step in and cut the power to save the engine from destroying itself. Why 10 seconds? 3 reasons, and they're all about physics that can't be engineered away. First, heat. These engines and motors create so much heat that the cooling systems can't keep up. Second, tires. The rubber literally can't handle the forces without overheating and failing. Third, the vehicle's shape and weight fight against everything you're trying to do. Let's break down each problem and why it matters.
When an engine makes 1,000 horsepower, it's burning fuel incredibly fast. But engines are only about 30% efficient. That means 70% of the energy becomes waste heat, heat that has to go somewhere. A 1,000 horsepower engine produces about the same amount of heat as 15 home furnaces running at the same time. Now imagine trying to cool all that heat while the vehicle is moving at 150 miles per hour. Here's where shape matters. A low, sleek sports car like a Ferrari has a drag coefficient. Think of it as a slipperiness number of about 0.24. Air flows smoothly over it. A Mercedes G-Wagon, which looks like a tall box, has a drag coefficient over 0.50. It's more than twice as hard to push through the air. At high speeds, pushing that boxy shape through air takes enormous power, power that all becomes heat. At 120 miles per hour, a G-Wagon needs over 600 horsepower just to fight the air resistance. A Ferrari needs only 280. The faster you go, the worse it gets. The power needed to fight air resistance increases incredibly fast. If you double your speed, you need 8 times the power. All that power becomes heat, and at some point, the air flowing through the radiator simply can't absorb heat fast enough. Engineers from Lotus admitted something shocking. Their 905 horsepower Eletre SUV can only run at full power for 8.7 seconds on a warm day. After that, the computer automatically drops it to 600 horsepower for 45 seconds to let everything cool down. You paid for 905 horsepower, but you can only rent it for about 9 seconds at a time. Even if you solve the heat issue, you immediately hit another wall: the tires. Think about what tires have to do. They're the only thing connecting a 5,000-pound SUV to the road. All the power, all the braking, all the turning, everything goes through 4 patches of rubber about the size of your hand. Modern performance SUVs are incredibly heavy. A Lotus Eletre weighs 5,467 pounds. A BMW iX M60 weighs 5,659 pounds. Some electric SUVs weigh over 7,000 pounds, more than a full-size pickup truck. Why so heavy? Batteries. A 100 kilowatt-hour battery pack weighs about 1,400 pounds by itself. That's like carrying a grand piano everywhere you go. Now try to accelerate that weight from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. The tires have to grip hard enough to transfer over 1,000 pound-feet of torque to the pavement without just spinning uselessly. Tire companies like Michelin and Pirelli have developed special hyper SUV tires. These are engineering marvels, special rubber compounds that grip even when hot, reinforced sidewalls to handle the weight, and tread patterns designed for extreme speeds. But they've reached their limit.
At a tire conference in Milan in 2025, Pirelli's chief motorsport engineer admitted, "We are at 97% of our material limits at 190 miles per hour. Beyond that, we're not doing transportation anymore, we're doing material science research." What does that mean? The rubber compound, the steel belts inside, the way the tire is constructed, it's all at the maximum of what's physically possible with current technology. When engineers at BYD were developing their 1,288 horsepower Yangwang U9, they said, "We can easily make the motors produce 1,500 horsepower, but we cannot make a tire that keeps that power connected to the road for more than one acceleration before the tire overheats and loses 30% of its grip." Heat, again. When tires work hard, they get hot. Hot tires lose grip. Less grip means you need more power to go the same speed. More power means more heat. It's a vicious circle. The expensive performance tires on these SUVs might last 15 hard acceleration runs before they start performing like regular cheap tires. On a 1,000 horsepower SUV doing repeated 0 to 60 launches, you might get 8 runs. Then you're driving on $2,000 worth of rubber that performs like $400 all-season tires. So if heat limits your power and tires limit your grip, how do these massive SUVs corner at all? Short answer, computers. Lots of computers. Every 1,000 horsepower SUV relies on something called torque vectoring. The system uses computers to split power between individual wheels, sometimes hundreds of times per second, to keep the vehicle from spinning out, flipping over, or crashing. Here's why that's necessary. SUVs are tall and heavy. Their center of gravity, the point where all the weight balances, is high off the ground. When you try to corner hard in something tall and heavy, physics wants to tip it over. The Lamborghini Urus has rear-wheel steering and active anti-roll bars. The rear wheels can turn up to 3 degrees in the opposite direction at low speeds to help it turn tighter. At high speeds, they turn the same direction as the front wheels to keep it stable. The anti-roll bars, think of them as metal rods that resist leaning, can stiffen or soften individually based on what the computer thinks you need. During development of the BYD Yangwang U9, a test driver tried turning off the electronic systems at the famous Nürburgring racetrack in Germany. At just 75 miles per hour, not even fast, the SUV spun out on a warm-up lap. With the systems on, the car feels planted and confident. Turn them off, and physics reminds you that you're driving a 5,500-pound vehicle with a high center of gravity trying to change direction quickly. Engineers from Porsche admitted the Cayenne Turbo GT can lap the Nürburgring in 7 minutes and 38 seconds, but the computer systems intervene over 1,000 times per lap. Without them, the vehicle would not complete a single corner at that speed. You're not really driving the car, you're suggesting directions to a computer that's doing the actual work of keeping you from crashing.
Let's talk about why shape matters so much, using simple numbers. A Ferrari 296 has a drag coefficient of 0.24 and a front area of about 2.15 square meters. Multiply those together and you get 0.516 square meters of drag area. A Lamborghini Urus has a drag coefficient of 0.38 and a front area of 2.89 square meters. That's a drag area of 1.098 square meters, more than twice the Ferrari's. A Mercedes G-Wagon with aftermarket body parts can have a drag area over 1.55 square meters, 3 times the Ferrari's. Why does this matter? Because at 120 miles per hour, that Ferrari needs about 280 horsepower just to push through the air. The Urus needs 450. The G-Wagon needs over 600. You're burning hundreds of horsepower just fighting the shape, and all that energy becomes heat. At 180 miles per hour, the Ferrari needs about 640 horsepower to maintain speed. The Urus needs nearly 1,000. The G-Wagon would need over 1,400. This is why most 1,000 horsepower SUVs are electronically limited to 180 to 190 miles per hour. Not because the engine can't make the power, but because pushing the shape faster requires so much energy that either the cooling system fails, the tires overheat, or you'd be getting 2 miles per gallon. The electric weight problem. Electric car makers claim they've solved these problems. Instant power from electric motors, low center of gravity because the batteries are in the floor, no engine heat. But they've created a different problem: massive weight. Remember those batteries? A 100 kilowatt-hour battery pack weighs about 1,400 pounds. Add the structure to protect it in a crash, the cooling system to keep it from overheating, and the motors, and you've added over 2,000 pounds compared to a gas SUV. Yes, that weight is low, which helps with cornering, but it doesn't help with momentum. Physics 101, momentum equals mass times speed. A 4,000-pound sports car at 60 miles per hour has 50% more momentum than a 4,000-pound sports car at the same speed. What does that mean? Longer stopping distances, more heat in the brakes and tires when you corner, more stress on everything. The Rivian R1S electric SUV weighs 7,148 pounds. When you brake from 70 miles per hour to 0, you're converting kinetic energy equivalent to dropping a small house from 30 feet in the air. All that energy becomes heat in the brakes and tires, and we're back to the same heat problem, just in different components. The real-world truth. Here's what the spec sheets won't tell you. You're buying a performance vehicle that physically cannot use its performance in real-world conditions. A 1,000 horsepower SUV can do 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. Once, maybe twice. Then heat builds up. The computer cuts power. The transmission gets too hot. The tires lose grip. It can theoretically hit 190 miles per hour, but only on a perfectly straight road at least 2 miles long with perfect weather after letting the engine cool down first on fresh tires with a professional driver. How many owners will ever do that? Less than 1%. On a racetrack, it'll complete maybe 2 fast laps before the brakes start fading and the tires start coming apart. 3 laps and you're in limp mode, where the computer severely limits power to prevent damage. On a twisty mountain road, it'll feel fast for about 5 minutes. Then the heat builds. The computer intervenes. The throttle response gets dull. You're no longer driving a 1,000 horsepower SUV. You're driving a 5,500-pound SUV with maybe 700 usable horsepower and overwhelmed cooling. The performance exists in commercials and YouTube videos. In real-world sustained use, physics takes over.
Because horsepower is a number, and numbers are easy to sell. You can't test drive steering feel in a parking lot. You can't put connected to the road on a spec sheet next to your competitors, but you can print 1,000 horsepower in huge letters and watch people line up. It's become an arms race. Porsche makes 640 horsepower. Lamborghini responds with 657. Aston Martin fires back with 697. BMW announces 738. Nobody's asking, do buyers actually need this? Can the vehicle even handle it? Will it make the car better to drive? They're asking, will it win the comparison test? Most buyers of these vehicles will never use even half the power. They'll drive to work, to the store, to pick up kids from school. The 1,000 horsepower is a status symbol, a number to mention at parties. Manufacturers know this. They're not building these for people who'll track them. They're building them for buyers who want to say they own the most powerful option. It's like selling a $15,000 watch that keeps time no better than a $50 Casio. The function doesn't matter. The status is the product. Here's where we hit the wall that no engineering budget can climb: Newton's laws of motion. These aren't suggestions. They're how the universe works. First law: an object in motion stays in motion unless something stops it. A 6,000-pound SUV at 100 miles per hour has enormous momentum. Stopping it requires enormous force. That force creates enormous heat. Second law: force equals mass times acceleration. Want to accelerate a 6,000-pound SUV as fast as a 3,000-pound sports car? You need twice the force. That force goes through the tires. The tires have a limit. Exceed it, and you just spin the tires and make heat instead of motion. Third law: Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Push 1,000 horsepower through the rear tires and the front of the SUV wants to lift up. The suspension compresses in back and stretches in front. Weight shifts, the balance changes. These aren't engineering challenges, they're physics laws. You can't engineer around Newton. You can only work within his rules. And here's the quiet shock. A 1,000 horsepower SUV reaches thermal saturation, the point where it creates heat faster than it can get rid of it, in about 8 to 12 seconds of full throttle use. After that, you're not making power anymore, you're managing heat. You get one acceleration run, one moment of glory. Then physics sends a bill, and the only way to pay is to back off and wait for everything to cool off. The pattern is clear. As power increases, usable performance actually decreases. A 500 horsepower SUV can use most of its power most of the time. The cooling system handles it. The tires manage it. The brakes work fine. A 750 horsepower SUV can use full power for short bursts. Heat builds, tires stress, brakes fade, but it's manageable. A 1,000 horsepower SUV can use full power for seconds before systems start protecting themselves. We've hit diminishing returns. Adding more power doesn't make the vehicle faster in real use. It just makes the window of usable performance smaller. Here's the paradox. The more extreme the numbers get, the less often you can actually use them. A simple Mazda Miata with 180 horsepower can be driven hard for hours. The cooling system handles it. The tires are happy. The brakes never get overwhelmed. A 1,000 horsepower SUV can be driven hard for seconds. Which one is actually more fun? Which delivers more joy per mile? The answer depends on whether you value the experience or just the bragging rights.